Today, we're gonna meet 10 JRPGs no one was expecting to be so damn challenging. We will explore how they are surprisingly hard, and of course, the reasons why. So let's begin! Number 10. Dark Cloud. Some RPGs were too damn hard because the localizer made them that way, like the 7th Saga for example, or they messed up like Nintendo with Radiant Dawn, or what better example than some of the Working Designs games such as the infamous Pop Full Mail. But in the case of games like Dark Cloud, or the rest of the list of today's video, the difficulty is the same no matter the region. The problem with this game is that it's too outdated, the controls are clunky, combat is very technical and not in a good way. You also have a plethora of penalties such as a thirst system, meaning if you don't drink water soon, you'll basically die. Weapons break, so you constantly have to worry about having enough repair powder, which makes grinding more tedious and painful. The weapon customization system is quite tricky and fools you into thinking increasing just attack power will suffice. So no, it won't. And yes, it's one of those where you have no party members, instead you can change to other characters and they all control vastly different. There's just so much about this damn game that it's hard to put up with it. But the point is, you'd never think a simple looking game like this, that starts off kinda friendly, will be this hard! It's far from being one of the hardest on the PS2 though, but it still is, well, a surprisingly hard JRPG. And the sequel? Yeah, you guessed it, it's also surprisingly hard. Number 9. Tales of Xillia 2. Most people already know this is one of the hardest Tales games ever made, but they probably don't know the reasons why. Well, it's surprisingly hard because the first one wasn't that hard, it's pretty balanced and it doesn't get serious until near the end, but it does still provide a decent amount of challenge even on normal mode. However, its sequel went bonkers and left a lot of fans completely flabbergasted. Well, there's many reasons why this game was made as difficult as it is, and a detailed explanation can be found in a video I'll leave at the end. But long story short, the developers wanted to create an overpowered character, Ludger in this case, who could change between different types of weapons at any time. They felt that would break the game and make it easier, which is ironically kinda what ended up happening with Tales of Berseria, by making the protagonist a bit broken. So they thought about that and increased the difficulty. And that was their solution. Yeah, well, I'll admit that's a justifiable reason, just not enough to make it so damn hard! It's also because you have a debt near the beginning and the only way to make money fast is to beat most of the special bosses, which are naturally hard. Anyway, if this explanation isn't enough for you, like I said, watch the video I'll leave at the end. Number 8. Atelier Ryza. I think one of the reasons why this particular Atelier game was so successful was because of its difficulty. Precisely because of it. Most previous games were easy as hell in terms of combat and gameplay mechanics. But also, ironically hard as hell because of the damn time limit. Well, Ryza didn't have one, which helped increase its popularity. But going back to the gameplay, yeah, this game is surprisingly hard. I mean hard in Atelier standards, okay? I can think of at least 100 or 200 RPGs that are much harder than this. But it's just surprising to me because before this I played a lot of Atelier games and they didn't have this level of difficulty in combat. And I don't think it's because it's turn-based on real time, as in you gotta decide your actions fast enough. I think it's because Ghost may have had some heat in the past about their games being somewhat easy in terms of battle, maybe by Japanese players, I don't know. So they upped their game with some of the last entries before Ryza, such as the legendary Sophie and its insanely brutal final boss. That was a seriously unbalanced game, man. So maybe they learned from that, and as a result, Ryza's difficulty was born, which feels hard, but balanced, never impossible, just some nasty spikes here and there that you can overcome with the right equipment and some grinding. So the game forces you to take its alchemy system seriously as possible. Nice, I like that. Number 7, Ark Rise Fantasia. I don't think most of you played this game. It's an exclusive to the Wii, inspired by the Tales series but not in combat. And that's what makes it surprisingly hard. I believe the very few people who played it and beat it weren't expecting the difficulty to be this insane. For starters, there are no settings about that, so no easy or hard mode, but it does feel like you're playing automatically on Nightmare most of the time. The reason is because of the battle system. It's quite unique and very hard to get into. Basically, everyone shares the same action points bar and every action obviously costs points, so you can use regular actions with 3 characters in one turn, or several actions with only 1 character. Plus, you can only control 3 characters, a 4th one will join every now and then, but it'll be controlled by the AI, which means action points count only for 3 allies. So let me give you a random example on why this game is so hard. Imagine you're ready to do this or that badass skill with this or that character, but that's gonna use most or all of your action points. That means you'll spend an entire turn for that, and if you're hurt, you won't be able to heal because your healer also needs action points. So if the boss decides to wreck you in their next turn, it spells trouble big time for you. And that's what makes this game so challenging. Well, that and the super clever enemy AI with incredible stats, especially for the bosses. Number 6, Rhapsody 3. This is the third and final game in the Rhapsody trilogy. It's broken down in several chapters, each with a different protagonist from the previous games, or antagonist. As a matter of fact, you can play with the bad girls in one of them. The first 2 games are very easy, which makes you expect this third entry to be exactly like that. But it's not! Because of the amount of characters, the developers thought it would be a good idea to have an excessive amount of party members during battle. Fortunately, you don't have to choose everyone's actions, as they'll act on their own, leading to some really stupid AI decisions, of course. You only select the actions of every commander and hope for the best. As a result, you'll encounter a large variety of pathetic enemies dying easily, but also the exact opposite and very often. Besides, the stat difference between your party roster, regardless of their equipment, is questionable at best. You can grind till your heart's content, but it won't help much with the lack of balance the game offers. The final boss is absolutely ridiculous here, and since you're relying on so many characters to win, it can be nuts to micromanage them all. How can this game be so freaking hard when the other 2 are a walk in the park? Never do you encounter any nasty spikes like in this one, especially not with regular enemies. And yes, it is indispensable to play the others before this one, before you ask me. Number 5, Wild Arms 5. This was my first Wild Arms game ever, and to date it's still my favorite. So when I got into it, I resented its difficulty but still managed to beat it. So, unlike other JRPGs in this list, my experience was backwards. I wasn't expecting this game to be hard, so when I noticed it was, I felt the others would be just as ridiculous, but nope. They have their challenging moments, but they just do not compare to the insanity of this 5th entry. Well, unless you count Crossfire on the PSP, which is beyond difficult, but that's not a very good game. 5 is, but shouldn't be so damn hard! You might think what makes it this way is its battle interface. You move on hexagons that are elemental, and if you're in the wrong one at the wrong time, you'll get wrecked, right? Well, 4 was also the same, and it was difficult as well, but not as much as this. Here, the RNG is a problem because you miss often or get blocked, but that shouldn't pose a real issue. The fact that your enemies are smart enough to move to the elemental hex opposite to your element, yeah, that speaks volumes. Having to spend 1 turn to recharge your arm weapon could be also an issue, but again, not really. It's just that some of the bosses are straight up bestial. Nightburn here, for example, is a 2 battle in a row, and it's a one-on-one fight with just your main character. And this is a game that heavily relies on party movement and combination attacks. And now you got a solo with Dean with an insanely buffed Momo? I won't spoil anything further than that, but let me warn you, each character has a solo battle like this. It's insane. It's a grind fest, but a pretty damn good one. Number 4, Final Fantasy IV Nintendo DS version. If you ever played any of the original versions on SNES or PS1, and then you play this remake, you probably already know there's a huge difference in difficulty. Square Enix ramped up the challenge on all regions for this remake, and their justification was lame to say the least. They said they wanted to appeal to retro gamers and make them feel like the old days when RPGs were more challenging. This is nonsense, since the original versions on SNES and PS1 are the real retro ones and are nowhere near as hard as this remake. All in all, it is by far the hardest version of Final Fantasy IV. What makes this so hard, you ask? Not much really, they just buffed the enemies, especially the bosses, for their so-called true retro experience, and that's it. There's barely anything worth mentioning apart from what I already said a few months ago in my top 10 hardest Nintendo DS JRPGs of all time. So there, you want a real hardcore version of this game? Then you've got it. Number 3, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Part 1. Another Final Fantasy remake that was made harder than the original is this one. Well, I'll admit I'm pretty mediocre at action RPGs, so this one was probably no hard at all for most of you. However, that may be due to the lame-ass reasons why it's still surprisingly hard. I've said this many times before and I'll say it again. I don't think modern developers know how to make their games hard. All they can come up with is buff stats for enemies and bosses and give them a crap ton of HP. So in the end, they're nothing but HP sponges. Final Fantasy VII Remake should be the poster child of that definition. Bosses aren't even challenging at all, and aren't very smart either when it comes to patterns. You can cheese through them if you're over-leveled or if you're skilled for action RPGs, but if you're not, you'll suffer through stupidly long boss battles just because they have a lot of HP. And that makes them boring. Like this house thing piece of ass! This is where I rage quit and downgraded to easy mode, not because it was hard, but because it was taking forever to beat. Later I found out I wasn't abusing magic spells and fighting it the right way, but you know what, I didn't care at this point, cause I breezed through it on easy. It's pathetic how Square Enix couldn't even make most bosses in this game challenging, and instead, they just made them hard by increasing their stats. You know what I call that? Lazy programming. Number 2, Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2. If you think I should be including the entire series, leave a comment. I can't because I barely touched the others. But I play these too, and boy, what the actual hell. How can two little PS2 action RPGs designed for kids be so stupidly hard sometimes? I don't understand! But anyway, whoever played these first two entries in the nowadays infamous series as a kid, well, they got into RPGs the hard way. But this is like Atelier Ryza, okay? They're both surprisingly hard, yes, but there's plenty more JRPGs on the PS2 that are far, far harder than them. It's just that no one was expecting these Disney-friendly, childish, and silly crossovers to actually have some really challenging battles. I swear about half of the bosses in both are straight up ridiculous. I think one of the reasons why they're so challenging is because Sora himself doesn't control marvelously, you know, and it's kinda hard getting used to the controls. Also because the leveling system is bare bones and equipment or skill customization aren't really all that helpful. Besides, it's not like the game's got an excellent party AI, so your allies often do stupid things or ignore the fact that you're getting your ass kicked. Both Sora and Roxas also feel kinda floaty when they move, jump, or, well, fly around. Maybe Square Enix thought of the same pseudo-retro argument for them, considering a lot of people will be playing them because of the Final Fantasy characters. They didn't want to disappoint with the difficulty. That's my guess. Number 1. Tales of Arise. So, the Tales series have a history of being difficult but balanced? Most of them. There's been some exceptions in the past, as you may already know. However, I certainly wasn't thinking of that when Arise was announced. I expected a challenging game but balanced, like most of the others. But for some reason, Namco decided to offer a surprisingly hard experience to players so they wouldn't complain. Cause, you know, if something isn't as hard as Soulsborne nowadays, people trash it. But if it's ridiculously unbalanced, with spikes all over the place, people also trash it. So I can't blame the developers for making a hard Tales game, which can still kick your ass on easy mode, but it's never impossible on normal mode. That's the reason why I think Arise is still a great game to play. Why is it hard though? I think it's simply because the enemy stats are above average, but also because they want you to overuse the combination attacks. Maybe also they want you to learn the different battle stances and attack accordingly. This is something I respect a lot because if you think about it, without these pretentious methods, all Tales games will have the same boring ass hack and slash combat. So to avoid that, they have to experiment a little bit with each entry to make them engaging enough. Enough to try and satisfy as many gamers out there. In terms of gameplay that is, because it's clear to me in terms of story, the game industry is pure venom nowadays. We've reached the end of the video about 10 surprisingly hard JRPGs. Leave a comment with your own personal picks if you want to. Also, don't forget to watch this interesting video about Tales of Xillia 1 and 2. Thank you for watching, and see you next time!